In 479 BC, a Greek army surrounded a fortified camp on the plains of Plataea. Inside, thousands of Persian soldiers, defeated and defenseless, waited. What happened next wasn't a battle. The fighting was over. This was something else entirely. History classes teach you about the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, the heroic last stand, the noble sacrifice. They don't teach you what came 11 months later, when 10,000 Spartans returned with the largest Greek army ever assembled. They don't explain what vengeance meant in the ancient world. They don't describe what happens when an entire civilization decides mercy is no longer an option. By sunset on the plains of Plataea, bodies would be counted not in hundreds, but in tens of thousands. The survivors, 3,000 from an army that had numbered over 100,000, would carry a message home that echoed across the Persian Empire. August 480 BC. The narrow pass at Thermopylae. King Leonidas lies dead. His body mutilated on Xerxes' orders, beheaded, crucified, displayed as a warning. Around him, 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, 400 Thebans, all dead. The Persians hadn't just killed them, they had made examples. Xerxes ordered the corpses stripped and left to rot in the summer heat. For 3 days, his army marched past the decomposing bodies. A lesson, a demonstration. This is what happens when you resist the King of Kings. But Thermopylae was never meant to be a victory. It was a transaction, lives traded for time. And as Persian forces swept south into Greece, the question became, what would that time purchase? September 480 BC. Mardonius, Xerxes' most trusted general, led the Persian army through central Greece. City by city, the advance continued. Thespiae burned to the ground. Every building, every temple, the population fled, but their homes were reduced to ash. Plataea suffered the same treatment. Systematic destruction, not just conquest, erasure. Then Athens. The Persians entered an evacuated city. The civilian population had fled weeks earlier to Salamis and the Peloponnesus. What remained were empty streets, abandoned homes, and temples on the Acropolis. The Persians torched everything. The Parthenon, ancient even then, burned. The temple of Athena Polias, housing sacred relics centuries old, was destroyed. Fires raged for days. When they finally died, Athens existed only as a scorched memory on a hilltop. This wasn't just warfare. This was systematic cultural annihilation. The Persians were erasing Greece from the earth. But then came Salamis, in the narrow straits between the mainland and the island. The Greek navy sprang its trap. The Persian fleet, massive and confident, found itself unable to maneuver in the confined waters. Greek triremes rammed, boarded, and sank ship after ship. By sunset, Persian naval supremacy was shattered. Xerxes watched from a golden throne on the shore as his invasion plans dissolved into fire and seawater. Within days, he made his decision: retreat to Persia with half the army, leaving Mardonius to finish the job with the remainder. The message was clear: this war should already be over. Finish it. 480 to 479 BC. During the winter months, Mardonius pulled his army back to Thessaly and Macedonia. Northern Greece was already under Persian control. His force still numbered over 100,000. Infantry, cavalry, and crucially Greek allies, traders from Thessaly, Macedonia, and other cities who had chosen submission over resistance. In Sparta, the winter passed differently. Pausanias, nephew of the dead Leonidas, was named regent. Young, untested in major command, he carried the weight of his uncle's death. Around him, the Spartan assembly debated. Some argued for caution, others for immediate action. But there was a third option, unspoken in the halls, yet present in every discussion: vengeance. What kind of victory were they preparing for? By spring, it was clear this war had become something more than survival. The Greeks had held. They had won at Salamis. Now they had to decide what came next. Spring 479 BC. Mardonius tried diplomacy first. He sent Alexander I of Macedon, a Greek who had submitted to Persian authority, to Athens with an offer. The terms were generous, almost suspiciously so. Complete reconstruction of Athens. Persian funding to rebuild every temple, every home. Additional land, favorable trade status, autonomy within the Persian Empire. Complete self-governance. All Athens had to do was abandon the Greek alliance and acknowledge Persian supremacy. The offer would solve every immediate problem the Athenians faced. They refused. The Athenian assembly gathered on Salamis, living in tents and requisitioned homes. Their city was ashes across the water. Everything they owned destroyed. Yet when Persian terms were read aloud, the response was uncompromising. The Athenians didn't just decline, they threatened anyone who suggested compliance. One council member who spoke in favor of the offer was stoned to death by the crowd. His wife and children were killed by Athenian women who dragged them from their homes. The message reached Mardonius loud and clear. There would be no negotiation. Mardonius responded with action. Greek vengeance had been deliberate, long-planned, and patient. By the time the plains of Plataea were reached, the Persians were not merely defeated, they were annihilated. The Greeks encircled the Persian camp and systematically destroyed it. Tens of thousands of soldiers died. 3,000 survived. Those survivors carried a warning across the Persian Empire: resist, and no king can save you. This was not heroism, as textbooks describe. It was methodical, almost industrial revenge. Sparta, Athens, and their allies exacted not only military retribution, but psychological punishment. The memory of Thermopylae, of Xerxes' desecration of Leonidas, demanded it. Greek vengeance was complete. By the time the sun set on the plains of Plataea, the message had been delivered. Persia had learned, in blood and ash, that Greek defiance was not fleeting. Mercy was not guaranteed. History remembered the courage of 300 Spartans, yes, but it also remembered the ruthlessness of an entire civilization when its patience ran out. His army returned to Athens, still abandoned, still empty. What the first burning had left partially standing, this second wave of destruction finished. Buildings that survived the first flames were systematically demolished. Wells were filled with rubble. Agricultural land was salted. This burning was different. It was not conquest, it was punishment. When the Persians withdrew again, Athens existed only as scattered stone and ash. 2 complete destructions in less than a year. Mardonius pulled back to Boeotia, to the plains near Plataea. He chose the ground carefully. The Asopus River provided water and a natural defensive line. Behind him, allied Greeks loyal to Persia offered a secure base. Most importantly, the flat plains favored his cavalry, the Persian army's greatest advantage. He constructed a fortified camp, wooden walls, defensive positions, supply stockpiles. Then he waited. The challenge was implicit. If you want to end this, come to ground that favors us. The Athenians sent urgent messages to Sparta. Either march now, or Athens would have no choice but to accept Persian terms. For weeks, Sparta hesitated. Isthmus of Corinth fortified. The Peloponnesus defensible. Why risk everything in open battle? But then Pausanias made his move. He mobilized not just Sparta's army, but the full military might of the Peloponnesian League. 5,000 Spartan hoplites, the full levy of every able-bodied Spartan citizen, 5,000 perioikoi, free inhabitants of Spartan-controlled territory, and 35,000 helots, armed as light infantry. An unprecedented number of semi-enslaved laborers were mobilized for combat. The Spartans marched north, picking up allies at every city: Corinth, Megara, Sicyon, Epidaurus, Treason. The Athenians joined from Salamis, 8,000 hoplites, their entire remaining military force. By the time the combined Greek army reached the hills above the Persian camp, it numbered nearly 110,000 men. This was the largest Greek army ever assembled in recorded history. The Greeks took position on the slopes of Mount Cithaeron, overlooking the plain where Mardonius waited. For anyone familiar with ancient warfare, the tactical situation was immediately clear. The Greeks held the high ground. Hoplites, shields interlocked, long spears bristling, excelled in frontal combat, but only on solid footing. The slopes gave them that plus the advantage of charging downhill. The Persians controlled the plain. Their cavalry could maneuver freely. Their archers could rain volleys across open ground. Advancing uphill into a hoplite phalanx would be suicide. Neither side could attack without surrendering their advantage. So they waited. Day 3 of the standoff. Persian cavalry probing Greek positions strayed too close. A unit of Athenian hoplites, supported by archers, engaged them in the foothills. Chaos erupted. Cavalry wheeling, hoplites bracing, arrows flying. Then an Athenian arrow struck the horse of Mischius, commander of the Persian cavalry. The animal collapsed. Mischius, adorned in golden armor, tried to fight on foot, but the Athenians swarmed him. Persian cavalry attempted a rescue, but the Athenians had already dragged Mischius into their formation. They stripped his armor piece by piece, stabbing him repeatedly until he ceased moving. When the Persian cavalry finally retreated, the Athenians paraded Micius's body through their lines on a cart. Every soldier filed past to see it. Morale surged. On the Persian side, wailing echoed across the plain. Horses were tended, riders' heads shaved, armor removed in grief. Micius was not just a commander, he was Mardonius's friend, his most trusted officer. The psychological balance had shifted. Days passed. Skirmishing continued, but no major engagement occurred. Then Mardonius acted. Persian cavalry located the Gargaffian Spring, the Greeks' primary water source fed by an underground stream on the slopes. Under cover of darkness, Persian horsemen reached it and systematically destroyed it. They filled it with dirt, rubble, and corpses, both animal and human. They diverted the flow and poisoned what remained. By morning, 110,000 Greek soldiers had no water. The Greek commanders convened, Pausanias, the Athenian general Aristides, the Corinthian officers. They faced an impossible situation. Stay and die of thirst within days, or retreat to new water sources and risk exposure to Persian cavalry and arrow volleys on the open plain. Oreanius ordered a complex nighttime maneuver. The center of the Greek line would fall back to a new position near Plataea, where other springs provided water. The left wing, the Athenians and their allies, would retreat to different high ground. The right wing, the Spartans and Tegeans, would hold position until the others cleared, then withdraw. This was meant to be a coordinated, controlled repositioning. It did not go according to plan. Nighttime retreats were nearly impossible to control under ideal conditions. Units in the center panicked. Orders were shouted into the darkness. Formations dissolved. The terrain, uneven and shadowed, contributed to confusion. Cavalry and light infantry collided with retreating hoplites. Horses bolted. Shouts became chaos. The Greeks were retreating under the stars, not as an army, but as scattered, frightened bodies. And yet, even in this chaos, the Greeks survived. By dawn, most had reached the new positions, though disorder persisted. The Persians could not fully exploit it. The night had hidden the scale of the Greek maneuver, and the slope favored defenders. The standoff continued, the tension palpable, a chessboard of men, animals, terrain, and patience. Both sides understood what a single mistake could cost. The annihilation of armies, the fall of leaders, the erasure of history from a plain. The stage was set for one of the most decisive confrontations of the ancient world. Commanders lose contact with their men. Some units retreat too far, others stop in the wrong positions. By dawn, the Greek army is scattered across several miles. The unified battle line is broken. From his camp, Mardonius watches the plain awaken. Greek positions are exposed. What he sees looks like retreat, disorder, vulnerability, chaos. What he does not see is the Spartan right wing deliberately holding formation. The Athenians have reformed on their new positions. This is not a rout. It is a poorly executed maneuver, but to Mardonius, it is opportunity. He orders a general advance. The Persian army moves out in waves. First, elite infantry. The immortals, lightly armored but highly trained, wielding short spears, swords, and wicker shields. Behind them, infantry drawn from across the empire, Medes, Bactrians, Indians, Sakai. On the flanks, the remaining cavalry, still formidable despite the loss of Micius. At the rear, Greek allies of Persia, Thessalians, Thebans, other submissive city-states. Mardonius rides at the front, in his distinctive armor, urging men forward. The target, the Spartan right wing, apparently fleeing, seemingly exposed. Pausanias watches. His 10,000 Spartans and Tegeans have been withdrawing slowly, maintaining formation but appearing to retreat. Now he gives the order. Stop! The Spartans halt, dress their lines, and turn to face the advancing Persians. The bronze-faced phalanx locks into position, 8 ranks deep, shields overlapping, spears protruding in perfect alignment. There is a problem. Greek religious protocols require favorable omens before battle. Seers, reading animal entrails, report the signs, unfavorable. Again and again, Pausanias orders new sacrifices. Again and again, the omens say, do not advance. The Persians close to arrow range. Thousands of archers release volleys. Arrows rain down on Spartan shields and exposed flesh alike. Men fall, struck through gaps in armor. The phalanx holds, but the tension grows. Forbidden to advance by religious law, unable to retreat without breaking formation, the Spartans endure. Pausanias orders more sacrifices. The omens remain negative. More arrows strike. More men fall. Finally, Whether the omens change or Pausanias decides to act, the order comes: advance. The Spartan phalanx moves like a single armored wave. Shields locked, spears bristling, they advance downhill. Persian forces brace. Wicker shields planted, short spears readied. The initial clash is catastrophic. Spartan spears, 8 feet long, designed for stabbing downward, punch through the wicker shields, penetrate lighter Persian armor, and collapse the front line. But the Persians do not break immediately. What follows is close-quarters combat unfamiliar to most Greeks. The Persians grab Spartan spears, pull them aside, fight with swords and daggers, even attempting to seize spear tips with their bare hands. Minutes stretch into hours. The Persians are less heavily armored but outnumber the Spartans, and desperation fuels their resistance. Mardonius fights at the front. Sources describe him mounted on a white horse, surrounded by 1,000 elite guards. The fighting around him is concentrated, vicious. One by one, his guards fall to Spartan spears. Spartans die too. Then, in the chaos, Mardonius goes down. Accounts vary. A stone strikes his head, a spear pierces through the chaos, his horse is killed, or he is overwhelmed by sheer force. What is certain, Mardonius, commander of the Persian invasion, dies in the melee. The effect is immediate. Word spreads through the Persian ranks. Their king's chosen representative, the architect of the campaign, is gone. The Persian center wavers, then breaks. Once a phalanx breaches an enemy line, pursuit becomes carnage. The Persians flee. Some retreat to the fortified camp, others scatter across the plains, seeking any escape route. Greek light infantry, cavalry, and helots, who had held back, surge forward. The battlefield becomes a killing field. Exhausted, separated, and unarmored, fleeing Persians are cut down. On the Greek left, Athenians engage Theban forces fighting for Persia. Here, combat is more balanced. Greeks against Greeks, similar equipment, similar training. The Thebans hold longer, resist fiercely, but eventually break as news of the Persian center's collapse spreads. Thousands of Persians retreat in disarray. Across Plataea, the psychological impact is just as decisive as the physical. Once the phalanx holds, the collapse of the Persian line turns a contest of numbers into a slaughter. Hoplites, though slower, dominate exhausted, demoralized infantry. Cavalry cannot maneuver against solid spears. Retreating units are trapped, encircled, or cut off. By noon, Mardonius's entire strategy, the fortified camp, the numerical superiority, the cavalry advantage, is shattered. Persian formations are scattered. Survivors flee in all directions. Those who make it to the camp find it abandoned, the gates thrown open in panic. The Battle of Plataea will end Greek fears of Persian domination. What began as a moment of apparent retreat, the Spartan right wing, the Athenians' repositioning, became the turning point. Discipline, cohesion, and the courage to act despite omens transformed near disaster into decisive victory. Persian prestige is broken. Sparta and Athens, once humiliated, now dictate the terms of survival in central Greece. The plain of Plataea is littered with bodies, banners abandoned, armor stripped, weapons broken. And yet, the Greek victory is not just in blood. It is in control, in order, in the understanding that discipline and timing, more than numbers, decide the fate of empires. The Persian army retreats to its fortified camp, taking refuge behind sturdy wooden walls. Inside, supplies, treasure, Mardonius's personal wealth, and the non-combatants, servants, camp followers, even some officers' families. The camp is defensible. If the Persians hold it, regroup, and mount a counterattack, they might survive until reinforcements arrive. The Greek army surrounds the camp. Spartans and Peloponnesians attempt assaults on the gates, but are repulsed. Trained for open-field combat, they struggle with siege warfare. Then the Athenians arrive. Experienced in more varied operations, they spot a weakness in one section of the wall. They coordinate a concentrated assault. With splinters, the wall collapses, and Greek forces pour through the breach. Inside, the Persian defense collapses instantly. Exhausted, demoralized soldiers, trapped by their own camp, cannot mount a coordinated resistance. The Greeks move methodically, clearing tents, supply areas, and every section of the camp. Resistance is brief. Non-combatants, servants, camp followers, families, fare no better. Conventions of war sometimes allowed sparing civilians, using them for ransom or slavery. Not here. Herodotus records the Persian force at Plataea numbered over 100,000. Approximately 3,000 survived. The rest, Every remaining soldier were killed by nightfall. Modern historians debate the figures. Ancient sources exaggerate. Perhaps the army numbered 80,000, 60,000. Even so, tens of thousands died. Greek casualties? Herodotus reports 159 dead. Later accounts suggest low thousands. The disparity is staggering. This was not a battle of back-and-forth maneuvering. This was systematic slaughter, beginning when the Persian line broke and continuing until virtually no one remained. After the killing stopped, the Greeks conducted a thorough inventory of the Persian camp. The treasure was immense: gold and silver bullion meant for army wages, Mardonius's personal wealth, plunder from Athens, Plataea, Thespiae, and other sacked cities. Luxury goods, jewelry, textiles, artwork were collected. 10% was set aside for the gods, dedicated at Delphi, Olympia, and other sacred sites. The rest was divided among the Greek cities according to contribution, with the Spartans receiving the largest share. Helots who fought received nothing. Mardonius's personal tent was preserved intact. Pausanias ordered a meal prepared using his kitchen staff, supplies, and gold dishware. Alongside it, a Spartan meal of simple barley, olives, and meat was prepared. Greek commanders observed both meals side by side. The message was clear: see what they brought to conquer us, and see what we used to defeat them. But the subtext was darker: see what we were willing to do to seize it. News of the victory spread quickly. Legend claims the Greek navy simultaneously defeated remnants of the Persian fleet at Mycale, liberating cities along the coast of Asia Minor. Whether this timing is myth or fact, the strategic result is undisputed. The Persian invasion of Greece is over. Greece has survived. But survival is only part of the story. The psychological and political landscape has shifted. Athens begins reconstruction, but not as it was. They fortify aggressively, rebuild their navy, creating the largest fleet Greece has ever seen. The war has taught that defense alone is insufficient. Sparta returns to the Peloponnesus, but Plataea leaves a shadow. Greeks do not merely respect Spartan skill. They fear it and admire the calculated ruthlessness with which they wield it. Poets compose victory odes, temples rise, monuments are erected. Details are curated. The number of Persian dead is celebrated. The speed of the victory is praised. Tactical brilliance is analyzed. But the events inside the fortified camp after the walls fell are mentioned only in passing. Herodotus, writing a generation later, does not moralize. He reports the deaths, the camp's capture, the wealth divided. Plutarch, centuries later, is more direct. Some Greeks questioned whether the scale of killing was necessary, whether military necessity justified the slaughter of trapped non-combatants. Survivors who escape across the Hellespont carry a clear message: Greek forces no longer merely defend. When they win, they erase. Plataea is not simply a victory, it is a demonstration. Order, discipline, and cohesion turned chaos into triumph. The Greeks' methodical destruction of the Persian camp sends a signal across the empire: resist, and you risk total annihilation. Submit, and survival is possible. The calculus of war, once fought only with shields and spears, now includes psychology, terror, and reputation. In military terms, Plataea is decisive. But in human terms, it is staggering. Tens of thousands dead, non-combatants slaughtered, an invading army obliterated, a command structure destroyed, a city liberated. This is not mere victory. It is systemic erasure, a lesson taught with blood and fire, repeated in memory across generations. Plataea becomes an object lesson. Commanders and kings take note. Discipline, cohesion, and ruthlessness can bend fortune itself. The Persian invasion is finished. Greece survives. But the cost is seared into history, and the shadow of Plataea shapes every future conflict. Plataea achieved its objective completely. The Persian army in Greece was destroyed. The invasion ended. The threat eliminated. Yet a question echoes through the historical record. Why so few survivors? Ancient battles, even decisive ones, typically saw armies break and flee, with the majority surviving. Casualties of 20 to 30% were catastrophic enough to break morale. 50% was almost unheard of. At Plataea, casualties exceeded 95%. This requires an explanation beyond battlefield chaos. What sets Plataea apart isn't the battle itself. It's what happened afterward. The Persian line broke, the Greeks pursued. Normal warfare. But the pursuit didn't stop at the camp. Siege conventions, surrender, ransom, selective targeting, were ignored. Every stage was pushed to maximum lethality. Decisions at the command level shaped the outcome. Pausanias, Athenian generals, and allied commanders determined that total elimination would define the victory. After Plataea, the Greeks turned their attention to Thebes, the Greek city that had allied with Persia. Pausanias demanded the surrender of leaders who orchestrated the alliance. Thebes refused. The Greek army besieged the city for 20 days. Eventually, Thebes yielded the accused leaders. The principal antagonist escaped, but his family was handed over. Timidas and other oligarchs were executed. The city itself was spared. Civilians were left alive. The contrast is instructive. The Greeks could show restraint. They chose not to at Plataea. In the years following, the Delian League formed, an alliance of Greek cities ostensibly for mutual defense against Persia. Within a generation, it transformed into the Athenian Empire. Cities attempting to leave the League faced sieges, conquest, and sometimes enslavement or death. Sparta watched Athens' expansion with unease. The rivalry that would erupt into the Peloponnesian War, devastating Greece for nearly 30 years, was rooted in the power dynamics established by the Persian Wars. The lesson of Plataea reverberated through Greek politics. Victory isn't just about winning, it's about what you do with that victory. Modern accounts focus on tactics, strategy, heroism. That's not wrong. But they tend to leap from the Greeks won to the Greek cities were liberated, glossing over what occurred in between. The fortified camp, the breach, the hours of systematic elimination. Ancient sources aren't unclear. Herodotus provides figures. Other sources corroborate. The discomfort arises because Plataea doesn't fit tidy categories. It wasn't a battle gone wrong. It was a deliberate choice to wield victory as a tool of annihilation. Ancient warfare had conventions, but this was something between accepted practice and conscious ruthlessness. When the Greeks erected the Victory Monument at Plataea, the inscription listed the participating cities, honored the dead, celebrated the victory. It didn't mention the 100,000 Persians who died. It didn't need to. Every Greek city that contributed knew what its soldiers had done. Every Persian who heard the story knew what happened when the walls fell. The monument was both celebration and warning. This is what happens when you invade Greece, burn Athens, or kill 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. You have not won. You have only guaranteed what comes next. The title of this story asks, how 10,000 Spartans avenged the 300. The answer is complex. They didn't just defeat the Persian army, they erased it. They didn't just win a battle, they eliminated an invasion force so completely that Persia never attempted a major campaign on mainland Greece again. They didn't just avenge their dead, they sent a message that reverberated across generations. Yet vengeance in the ancient world was neither clean nor simple. Plataea raises difficult questions. When does defense become elimination? When does necessary force become systematic slaughter? When does righteous vengeance become something even those executing it cannot easily reconcile? The Greeks won. They secured freedom, ended the invasion, and laid the foundation for a civilization that would shape Western history. But they also learned something about themselves. When survival alone is no longer the question, a civilization can unleash its full capacity for destruction. Thermopylae is remembered because it is comprehensible: noble sacrifice, heroic resistance, defeat, and glory. Plataea is harder to remember because it forces us to confront what comes after the heroic sacrifice. It forces reflection on the shape of victory when mercy is removed from the equation. Sometimes, the most troubling moments in history are not the defeats, they are the victories.